My name is Caleb. Today I want to tell you my story about how I quietly walked away from a marriage that slowly erased me. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and comment below, where are you watching from? For a long time, I had already felt like I was on the edge, more roommate than husband. Long before things officially ended, the cracks had already spread across our life together. But the moment I knew I was done came during a backyard gathering, surrounded by people who laughed at me like I didn't matter. That night, after the noise died and the lights dimmed, I walked away. Amanda and I had been married for nearly a decade. In the beginning, we were in sync, dreaming together, building a future. We didn't just want a house to live in. We wanted something to belong to, a home. And for a while, it felt like we were heading that way. But midway through our marriage, something changed. Not all at once. It was slow. So slow, it almost slipped past us. The shift really began when we started trying for children. We both wanted them, badly. But month after month, nothing happened. So we turned to the experts, clinics, appointments, injections, schedules, everything they recommended, we did. And each month came with new hope, only to end with a quiet emptiness that felt like smoke filling the air. Silent, but choking. I watched Amanda fade. She stopped smiling as much. She spoke less. At first I told myself it was stress. It hurt both of us. But one day I realized she wasn't just struggling, she had stopped trying. Not just with the treatments, with me. When the dream became too heavy, she dropped it. And with that, something else fell too, our connection. The warmth we once shared disappeared. We were still under the same roof, sharing the same bed, sitting across from each other at dinner. But it felt like I was dining with a ghost. The silence between us didn't just grow, it thickened. And the worst part, she didn't seem to notice or care. She had shut down completely. Still, I believed love meant staying, even when it hurt. Then, over a year prior to the final straw, Amanda's sister Carly showed up at our doorstep. Her marriage had just crashed and burned. From what I heard, it was chaos, screaming matches, betrayal, even the authorities got involved. She needed a place to land, and Amanda asked me if Carly and her 2 kids could stay for a few days. I agreed. It felt like the right thing to do. The kids were innocent, and Carly needed time. But a few days turned into a few weeks. Then more. She didn't mention finding a job. No plans about moving forward. Her things slowly took over our guest room, then the living room. Toys spilled into the kitchen, even our bedroom. Their laundry was mixed with ours. Still, I said nothing. By the time we were into the 3rd month, it was clear. This wasn't temporary. It felt like a second family had taken over my house, and I was the outsider. Carly was loud and snide, always had some smart comment ready. Her kids, wild. There was no discipline, no boundaries. Our home felt like a daycare run by a worn-out party clown. Each evening I'd come home drained, hoping for peace. Instead, I was met with spilled drinks, loud cartoons, and tension that hung in the air like static. Arguments replaced conversations. And Amanda? She always backed Carly, no matter what happened. When I calmly raised concerns, Amanda dismissed them like they didn't count. "She's my only sister," she'd say. Or, "You can't expect me to throw her out just because they did one thing you don't like." My frustration? Ignored. My feelings? Pushed aside. Then came the moment that burned into me. Carly was making cruel jokes at my expense. Instead of stopping her, Amanda chuckled and said, "Don't mind him, he takes everything to heart." They both laughed. I didn't. That night I slept on the couch again. Not because I wanted to, but because Amanda let Carly and her kids have our room. And that was just the beginning. Now I know some people might hear all this and wonder, why didn't you just leave? And I asked myself that same question more than once. The truth is, a big part of what Amanda was going through had to do with the heartbreak of not being able to have children. It broke her. And I kept thinking, if we could make it through that storm together, maybe the connection we once had would return. So I stayed, way longer than I should have. But over time I began to feel it deep inside. I was worn out. Love, all by itself, wasn't enough to keep me standing in a house where I felt like a stranger. So one day, quietly, I scheduled a meeting with a family attorney, told them everything. A few weeks later, the legal documents were finalized and ready to go. But I still couldn't hand them over. Not because I believed Amanda would suddenly change, but because some part of me just wanted to see that old spark in her eyes again. Even once. Even if it wasn't real. But that moment never came. The air between us stayed heavy. The silence, thicker than ever. That's when I made a list, one step at a time. First, I packed some of my essentials. A few outfits, some important papers, a few personal items that still meant something to me. I placed them in vaguely labeled containers and kept them tucked away, just in case. Next, I paid in cash to rent a small storage space far from home, the kind of spot no one would even think to check. I moved the containers there slowly, one trip at a time. I opened a new bank account under a variation of my name, picked up a new phone, searched for a quieter town somewhere peaceful. I had every detail planned, almost to the hour. If things fell apart, I wouldn't just leave. I'd vanish. Still, I didn't go. Not yet. As much as it hurt, a part of me sank, ill-cared. Deep down, I still saw the woman I married. Then came the day everything shifted. It was a Saturday. I left the house for a few hours to clear my head. When I came back, something was off. There were cars crowding the street, laughter echoing from the backyard. I could hear children yelling before I even opened the front door. I followed the noise outside. And there it was, a full-blown family barbecue, kids running around with plastic drink pouches, someone flipping burgers, music playing softly in the background. The patio table was loaded with food and stacked with disposable dishes. Everyone seemed cheerful and locked into conversation. Except me. I hadn't been told a single thing about this. I stood there at the doorway for a few seconds, soaking it all in. It felt like I had walked into someone else's party. At my own house. I kept my face blank and scanned the crowd. Amanda was standing near the table, laughing with her parents. Just then, one of her aunts called out, "Caleb, can you grab this for me real quick?" I nodded and walked over. I had always gotten along fine with Amanda's relatives, maybe even better than with her, especially lately. So I forced a smile and helped out. As I passed the tray along, another relative leaned toward me and smiled curiously. "Hey, where have you been all day? We've been here for hours. Didn't you know we were coming?" And just like that, it hit me. I was excluded, left out on purpose. Before I could even answer, Carly cut through the chatter, loud enough for everyone to hear. She said, "If Caleb vanished one day, I don't think anyone would even notice." The crowd burst into laughter. To make it worse, she added, "I didn't even know you weren't around." Everyone chuckled again. To them, it was funny, but not to me. So I lifted the hot dog I had just picked up, held it like a toast, gave a half smile, and said, "Let's test that theory." Silence. A few relatives glanced at me awkwardly, maybe thinking I was joking too. I wasn't. That was the final straw. I had already been planning my exit, but in that moment I was sure. I didn't belong here anymore. Not as a husband, not even as a person. I was invisible. Later that night, after the guests were gone and the house quieted down, I packed my travel backpack. Just the basics: clothes, my laptop, documents, and some cash. Before I left, I placed the signed legal documents right in the center of the kitchen counter. I stuck a handwritten message on top. It read, "Did it finally register?" Then I walked out the door and locked it behind me. I got in my car, closed the door behind me, and just drove. I didn't look back. That same night, I erased every online trace of myself. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, gone. Then I took out an old prepaid phone, swapped the phone chip, and dropped the original one into a storm drain at a gas station in a nearby county. I didn't want to be found, not by Amanda, not by anyone. I kept driving until I reached a secluded cabin I'd seen listed weeks before on a tiny classified site. It was owned by a retired man who didn't ask questions. I paid a few months in advance, all in cash. It was deep enough in the trees to feel hidden from the world, but still close enough to a small town where I could grab food when needed. To get by, I started doing remote project work online, just enough to cover groceries, power, and the few basic things I allowed myself. Life became quiet. Still. There was no routine, no alarms, no rush. I woke to the sound of birds instead of arguments. The days blurred together. My beard got longer. I ate better, slept deeper, thought more clearly than I had in years. I never once checked on Amanda, not because I didn't care anymore, but because I finally accepted that I didn't need to. That chapter had ended, and reopening it would only bring back the pain I had worked so hard to leave behind. Viral months later, I needed to find an old file from years ago, so I logged into one of my forgotten email accounts. I hadn't opened it since I disappeared. I wasn't expecting anything, but as soon as I signed in, my heart froze. Dozens of unread messages, all from Amanda. At first, I hovered over the delete button. My fingers shook, but after a long pause, I clicked. The early ones were sharp, enraged. She accused me of being selfish, a coward, said I had no right to disappear the way I did. She promised she'd drag me to court if that's what it took. But the further I read, the more the tone shifted. The rage faded. Her messages grew uncertain, quiet, like she was finally hearing her own voice echoing in the silence I had left behind. The most recent emails hit differently. One said the mortgage provider was sending warning letters, missed payments, possible foreclosure. She admitted she was now working 2 jobs just to keep the house, and that she'd finally asked Carly and the kids to leave. They weren't helping, she wrote. Now I see what you were trying to tell me. Another message read, I get it now. I understand why you felt so distant. I just wish I hadn't been so blind. Then another, I miss you. Not out of need, but regret. I finally understand what you gave up trying to keep us afloat. And then came the one that gutted me. I was stupid. I took you for granted. I thought you'd always be there no matter how much I pushed you away. I still haven't signed the legal documents. I keep hoping one day you'll walk through the door. I sat staring at the screen, frozen. I won't lie. I felt something. My chest ached reading those words. That part of her. The one that once loved deeply. The one who built dreams with me. It felt like that version had finally returned. But feelings alone don't fix everything. For too long, I had convinced myself that time and love would heal the damage. But now, even reading those emotional messages, I didn't know if I could ever go back. Not after everything. It had been exactly one complete cycle around the sun since I disappeared. A full year of silence, solitude, and finally breathing freely. That afternoon, I drove into town to grab supplies. I stopped at a roadside cafe I'd grown fond of, quiet, tucked away near the outskirts of town. As I stood at the pickup counter waiting for my coffee, I heard someone say my name. I ignored it at first. Then the voice repeated, more surprised this time. Caleb? I turned. It was Marcus, an old mutual friend. His face went pale like he'd seen a ghost. In a way, I guess he had. We exchanged awkward hellos. I kept it short, told him I was doing okay. Didn't give much more than that. Less than a week later, someone knocked on my cabin door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the curtain, and there she was. Amanda. She stood on the porch, not moving. I opened the door slowly, my face unreadable. What do you want? I asked. She didn't speak at first. Then she cried uncontrollably, said she was sorry, Said she hadn't realized things had gotten that bad, that she wished she'd listened, that she should have understood sooner. I let her speak, but I didn't say anything back, not yet. I stood there on the porch listening. I didn't interrupt. I didn't flinch. When Amanda finished talking, I stepped outside with her. I looked her straight in the eyes and said calmly, "I'll come back, but only to close this the right way. I'll sign whatever needs signing. We'll finish this like adults. But I can't be your husband again. Not after everything. Not after what Carly put me through, and not after you stood there and watched it happen." She didn't argue. There was no anger, no begging, just a quiet nod, slow and shaky. She wiped her face and tried to pull a smile, but it didn't last. Then she turned and walked away. And I let her. After all this time, I've had a lot to think about. And there's one truth that keeps coming back. People don't always see the value of what they have until it's gone. That's a hard lesson, one that life doesn't teach gently. Sometimes it's a lesson you have to live through, and sometimes you're the one forced to teach it. For years, I stayed in a marriage that was fading before my eyes. I held on through emotional distance, through the chaos that came with Carly and her kids, through the demeaning behavior that never stopped. I stayed because I loved Amanda. I stayed because I thought if I tried hard enough, she might try too. But she didn't. Not until I vanished. Only when I disappeared did she finally begin to understand. Only in my silence did she hear everything I had been saying for years. Sometimes, that's what it takes. The absence of something people always assumed would stay. So if you're watching this and you feel like your voice is getting drowned out, like your presence doesn't matter anymore, I hope my story makes you pause. Don't wait until you're empty just to prove you had something to give. And if you're the one pushing someone away, ask yourself this: why does it take them walking out the door for you to finally see their worth? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment, share your story. Even if you haven't lived it, tell me what you think. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who might be sitting quietly with their bags already packed, send this their way. You never know. You might be the reason they stay, or the reason they finally choose to go. Thanks for being here. That was my story. And even though time has passed, some part of it still lingers inside me. Maybe you've gone through something similar, or maybe you just understand it in your own way. Either way, I'd really like to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know how this story made you feel. And if you think someone else needs to hear this, share it with them. Don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might just speak to you in ways you didn't expect.